I am Hercule Poirot. Welcome to my new mystery story.
It was through one of those seemingly innocent invitations that often precede the most extraordinary of mysteries that I found myself a guest at Bellemere Court on that fateful October evening. My old friend Captain Peter Vale, whom I had known since our days together in France, had pressed me most earnestly to join his father's house party. "You simply must come, Hastings," he had insisted with that particular brand of enthusiasm that suggests both genuine affection and perhaps a touch of anxiety. "Father is unveiling the golden clock at last. It promises to be quite the spectacle, and I confess I should welcome a friendly face among the gathering." The gathering, as I was soon to discover, consisted of that peculiar mixture of personalities that seems to gravitate naturally toward the country houses of the wealthy. A collection of individuals bound together not by genuine affection, but by the complex web of obligation, ambition, and barely concealed animosity that characterizes so much of English society. Bellemere Court itself was a magnificent example of Georgian architecture, its honey-colored stone facade glowing warmly in the autumn twilight as my motor car crunched up the graveled drive. The house commanded sweeping views across perfectly manicured lawns that rolled away toward distant woodlands, their trees now touched with the first bronze and gold of the season. Yet it was not the external grandeur of the estate that immediately captured one's attention upon entering the great hall, but rather the extraordinary timepiece that dominated the space with an almost imperial presence. The golden clock, for so it had come to be known throughout the household, was indeed a marvel to behold. Standing nearly 8 feet in height, it was constructed of the finest ormolu and black marble, its case adorned with intricate astronomical devices that tracked the movements of celestial bodies with mechanical precision. The clock face itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, featuring a brilliant sunburst design surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac, each rendered in exquisite detail. Most remarkable of all were the gilded planetary arms that revolved slowly around the face, their measured dance marking not merely the hours, but the very passage of cosmic time itself. Sir Lionel Vale, our host, was a man of considerable substance both financially and physically, a robust gentleman in his early 60s whose fortune, built upon steel and shipping, had afforded him the luxury of indulging his passion for collecting rare and beautiful objects. His square, florid face bore the confident expression of one accustomed to having his desires fulfilled, though I detected beneath his jovial exterior a certain restless energy that suggested deeper currents of dissatisfaction. "Magnificent, isn't she?" Sir Lionel boomed as he conducted me on a tour of his prize. "Acquired her from Count Volkonsky. Poor fellow was quite desperate to sell, after that unpleasant business in St. Petersburg." The clock was crafted in the 18th century by one Jean-Baptiste Martineau, a master horologist whose work was coveted by royalty throughout Europe. But here's the truly fascinating part, my dear Hastings. Hidden within the base is a secret compartment, sealed by a mechanism that requires a precise sequence of astronomical alignments to open. The legend surrounding this hidden chamber had captured Sir Lionel's imagination completely. According to the documentation that had accompanied the purchase, the compartment had been designed to conceal something of great value or significance. Perhaps a treasure, perhaps documents of historical importance, or perhaps merely the whimsical fancy of an eccentric craftsman. Whatever lay hidden within had remained undisturbed for over 2 centuries, as the secret of its opening had died with its creator. "Tonight," Sir Lionel announced with theatrical satisfaction, "we shall finally solve the mystery. Miss Caldwell has spent months studying the mechanism, and she assures me that at the stroke of midnight, when the planets achieve their proper alignment, the secret will be revealed at last." Miss Verity Caldwell, the clock restorer Sir Lionel had employed for this delicate work, was a serious young woman of perhaps 30 years, with intelligent grey eyes and the slightly ink-stained fingers that marked her as one who worked with precision instruments. She possessed that particular combination of scholarly dedication and practical skill that one associates with the finest craftspeople, and it was clear that she regarded the golden clock not merely as an object of beauty, but as a complex puzzle to be solved through patient observation and meticulous analysis. The other members of our party presented a fascinating study in contrasts. Lady Ione Vale, Sir Lionel's second wife, was a woman of striking beauty and considerable poise, though she appeared to be some 20 years her husband's junior. Her cool grey eyes seemed to observe everything while revealing nothing of her own thoughts, and I noticed that her gaze had a tendency to drift toward Count Alexei Morozov with what might charitably be described as more than casual interest. Count Morozov himself was one of those melancholy Russian exiles who had found refuge in England following the recent upheavals in his homeland. Tall and elegantly dressed, with prematurely silver hair and the bearing of one born to privilege, he carried about him an air of romantic fatalism that I suspected many women found irresistible. His presence at Bellemere Court was ostensibly social, though I detected subtle undercurrents that suggested his relationship with the Vale family might be more complex than appeared on the surface. Mr. Armand Delacroix, the art dealer who had facilitated the clock's purchase, was a sleek, well-groomed man whose obsequious manner barely concealed what I took to be a sharp commercial intelligence. His smile appeared to have been practiced before a mirror, and his conversation was peppered with flattering references to Sir Lionel's exquisite taste and discerning eye. Yet I observed that when he thought himself unnoticed, his expression would harden into something altogether more calculating. Dr. Ambrose Kershaw, the family physician, presented himself with the dry authority common to his profession. A man of perhaps 55 years, with graying hair and steady hands, he had attended the Vale family for the better part of 2 decades. His manner was professionally reassuring, though I detected a certain tension in his bearing that suggested he was not entirely comfortable with the evening's proceedings. Miss Nora Whitfield, Sir Lionel's personal secretary, was a woman of perhaps 28 years whose competent exterior masked what I suspected were deeper currents of emotion. She moved through the household with the quiet efficiency of one who knew everyone's business while keeping her own counsel, though I could not help but notice the way her eyes would seek out Captain Peter Vale with what appeared to be more than professional interest. Mrs. Beddoes, the housekeeper, ruled over the domestic arrangements with the iron discipline of a military commander, her starched apron and severe expression brooking no interference with the smooth operation of the household. She had served at Bellemere Court for over 30 years and clearly regarded any disruption to established routine as a personal affront. As the evening progressed toward the appointed hour of revelation, I became increasingly aware of the subtle tensions that ran beneath the surface of our gathering. There was something in the way Lady Iona's fingers drummed silently against her wineglass, in the manner Count Morozov's eyes would follow her movements, in the careful way Mr. Delacroix avoided certain topics of conversation, that suggested this was no ordinary social gathering. Each member of our party seemed to be carrying secrets, and I had the distinct impression that the opening of the golden clock's hidden chamber might reveal more than Sir Lionel had bargained for. At 1:45, we assembled in the great hall for the grand unveiling. The electric lights had been dimmed at Sir Lionel's direction, leaving the space illuminated primarily by the soft glow of candles and the silvery moonlight that streamed through the tall windows. The effect was undeniably dramatic, lending an almost mystical quality to the proceedings. Miss Caldwell took her position beside the clock, a small brass key gleaming in her hand. "The mechanism is extremely delicate," she explained in her precise, scholarly voice. "Sir Lionel will insert the key, and I will guide the planetary alignments. According to my calculations, we must align Mars with the 3rd hour marker, Venus with the 7th, and finally bring the Sun to its zenith position at 12. When the sequence is complete, the hidden chamber should release." "Should?" Sir Lionel inquired with a raised eyebrow. "Will," Miss Caldwell corrected herself with quiet confidence. As the clock in the village church began to toll the midnight hour, Sir Lionel raised the brass key with ceremonial gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "after 2 centuries of silence, the golden clock shall speak at last." He inserted the key with a flourish, and Miss Caldwell began the delicate process of adjusting the planetary mechanism. One by one, the gilded arms moved into their prescribed positions, each alignment accompanied by a soft, musical chime that seemed to resonate through the very walls of the great hall. But as the final alignment was achieved and the clock prepared to strike 12, something went terribly wrong. Instead of the expected 12 chimes, the mechanism continued its tolling, 13, 14, 15, until the sound became a discordant clanging that seemed to fill the air with ominous portent. At that precise moment, the electric lights flickered once, twice, and then died completely, plunging us into darkness save for the pale moonlight. In that brief interval of confusion, no more than 30 seconds, we heard the sound of something heavy falling, followed by a sharp cry of alarm from Miss Caldwell. When the lights flickered back to life, we discovered Sir Lionel Vale lying motionless at the base of the golden clock, the brass key fallen from his lifeless fingers. Dr. Kershaw was beside him in an instant, his professional training overriding the shock that had frozen the rest of us in place. His examination was swift but thorough, and when he finally looked up, his expression was grave. "I'm afraid Sir Lionel is dead," he announced quietly. "It appears he suffered some form of seizure and struck his head against the marble base as he fell." Yet even as Dr. Kershaw spoke these words, I detected something in his manner that suggested uncertainty. There was a faint, bitter odor in the air, barely perceptible but unmistakably present, that reminded me unpleasantly of almonds. The golden clock, its secret mechanism apparently damaged by the evening's events, had fallen silent, its hidden chamber remaining as mysterious as ever. As we stood in stunned silence around Sir Lionel's body, I could not shake the feeling that we had witnessed not a tragic accident, but something far more sinister. The 13th chime, the convenient failure of the lights, the precise timing of events, all suggested a carefully orchestrated plan, rather than mere misfortune. It was then that I made a decision that would prove to be of the utmost importance. While the others busied themselves with the immediate necessities of summoning the local police and attending to Lady Iona's distress, I quietly withdrew to my room and composed a telegram to my old friend Hercule Poirot. In it, I described the evening's extraordinary events and begged him to come to Belemere Court at his earliest convenience. For if there was indeed a murderer among us, and my instincts told me there was, then only the brilliant deductive powers of the little Belgian detective could hope to unravel the truth hidden beneath the golden clock's glittering facade. The mystery of Belemere Court had begun, and I had the distinct feeling that before it was solved, more than one carefully guarded secret would be dragged into the unforgiving light of day. The hours that followed Sir Lionel's tragic collapse passed in that peculiar state of suspended animation that descends upon a household when death has made its unwelcome appearance. The local constabulary arrived within the promised hour, led by Inspector Blunt of the Market Ferris Division, a solid, methodical man whose weathered features suggested long experience with the darker aspects of rural life. Yet for all his professional competence, I detected in his manner a preference for the straightforward explanations that would allow him to conclude his investigation with minimal disruption to the established order. Dr. Kershaw proved most accommodating to this inclination, providing a detailed account of Sir Lionel's recent health concerns that painted a convincing picture of a man whose constitution had been gradually failing. His blood pressure had been irregular for months, the doctor explained with professional authority. Just last week he complained of dizzy spells, and I had warned him against undue excitement. The evening's proceedings, combined with the shock of the clock's malfunction, would have placed considerable strain upon his heart. Inspector Blunt nodded approvingly at this medical testimony, though I noticed he paid little attention to my mention of the faint almond scent that had briefly permeated the air. "Imagination plays tricks in moments of shock, Captain Hastings," he observed dismissively. "Dr. Kershaw's explanation accounts for all the observed facts quite satisfactorily." Yet as I watched the inspector conduct his preliminary examination, I became increasingly convinced that several crucial facts were being overlooked entirely. The precise timing of the electrical failure, the clock's unprecedented 13 chimes, the convenient darkness that had concealed the crucial moments, all suggested a degree of orchestration that seemed incompatible with mere accident. My suspicions were further aroused by the behavior of our fellow house guests in the aftermath of the tragedy. Lady Ione, though maintaining her composure with admirable self-control, seemed almost too composed for a woman who had just witnessed her husband's sudden death. Count Morozov hovered near her with protective solicitude, his dark eyes constantly alert as if anticipating some further calamity. Mr. Delacroix appeared genuinely distressed, yet his anxiety seemed focused more upon the implications for his business relationship with the Vale family than upon genuine grief for the deceased. Miss Caldwell remained beside her beloved clock like a faithful guardian, her scholarly mind clearly troubled by the mechanism's inexplicable behavior. "It should never have struck 13, she murmured to herself as she examined the delicate brass works. "The strike train is governed by precise mechanical limits. For it to exceed 12 chimes, someone would have had to adjust the regulating mechanism deliberately." This observation drew sharp looks from several members of our party, though no one chose to pursue its implications openly. Inspector Blunt, however, seemed content to attribute the malfunction to the general excitement of the evening and the age of the mechanism itself. It was Miss Whitfield who provided the most illuminating glimpse into the household's hidden tensions. Finding her in Sir Lionel's study as she attended to the necessary correspondence, I ventured to express my condolences and was surprised by her candid response. Sir Lionel had been under considerable strain in recent weeks, she confided quietly, her efficient fingers pausing over the typewriter keys. There were financial pressures he was reluctant to discuss, and several of his recent investments had proven less profitable than anticipated. The golden clock represented more than a collector's prize to him. It was a symbol of stability in increasingly uncertain times. Her words suggested depths of complexity in Sir Lionel's circumstances that had not been apparent during the previous evening's festivities. When I pressed her gently for additional details, however, she retreated into professional discretion, claiming only that the household accounts had required increasingly creative management in recent months. By mid-morning, I had dispatched my urgent telegram to Poirot, describing the evening's extraordinary events and begging him to come to Belemere Court at his earliest convenience. His reply arrived by noon, characteristically brief but reassuring. "Most intriguing puzzle. Arrive afternoon train. Ensure nothing disturbed. H.P." As I awaited my friend's arrival with growing impatience, I found myself drawn repeatedly to the sealed great hall, where the golden clock stood silent beneath its shroud of official tape. Through the glass panels of the door I could glimpse its gilded form, now seeming less a marvel of craftsmanship than a silent witness to secrets that demanded revelation. The mystery of Belemere Court was deepening with each passing hour, and I had the distinct conviction that only Hercule Poirot's legendary powers of deduction could hope to untangle the web of deception that surrounded Sir Lionel's untimely death. Hercule Poirot arrived at Market Ferris Station on the afternoon train, stepping down onto the platform with that characteristic precision that never failed to restore my confidence in the ultimate triumph of order over chaos. His diminutive figure was immaculate despite the journey. His patent leather shoes gleaming, his waxed mustache perfectly groomed, and his green eyes already alert with the keen intelligence that had solved so many seemingly impossible mysteries. "Mon ami Hastings," he greeted me warmly, pressing my hand with genuine affection, "your telegram speaks of a death most mysterious, occurring at the precise moment when secrets are to be revealed." This suggests to Poirot that we are dealing not with coincidence, but with careful planning. Tell me everything as we drive, and omit no detail, however small it may seem. During our journey to Belemere Court, I recounted the previous evening's extraordinary events with as much precision as I could muster, paying particular attention to the sequence of the clock's malfunction, the convenient electrical failure, and the faint but unmistakable scent of almonds that had briefly permeated the air. Poirot listened with that intense concentration I knew so well, his egg-shaped head tilted slightly as he absorbed each detail. "This golden clock," he mused thoughtfully. "It strikes 13 times instead of 12. The lights fail at that precise moment, and Sir Lionel Vale dies. 3 events perfectly coordinated. The good Inspector Blunt, he accepts this as mere coincidence?" "He seems entirely satisfied with Dr. Kershaw's medical explanation," I replied. "A weak heart, the excitement of the evening, an unfortunate accident when Sir Lionel fell." "Ah, but you detected the odor of almonds, did you not? Most significant. And this Miss Caldwell, the clock restorer, she maintains that such a malfunction could not occur naturally. She seemed quite certain that someone must have deliberately tampered with the mechanism. Yet Inspector Blunt dismissed her concerns as feminine hysteria." Poirot's eyebrows rose eloquently. "The good inspector has much to learn about the precision of mechanical devices and the reliability of expert testimony. But tell me, what of the secret compartment that was to be opened? Was it revealed during the confusion?" This question struck me forcibly, for in the chaos following Sir Lionel's death, I had quite forgotten about the hidden chamber that had been the evening's primary purpose. "I believe not. The mechanism was damaged, and Miss Caldwell seemed concerned primarily with understanding what had gone wrong." Most illuminating indeed. So we have a death occurring at the precise moment when valuable secrets are to be revealed, yet the secrets themselves remain hidden. This suggests our criminal's primary concern was not theft, but something far more personal. Upon our arrival at Belemere Court, Poirot's first request was to examine the scene of the tragedy, despite Inspector Blunt's obvious reluctance to permit civilian interference. The inspector, a solid man of middle years, with the steady bearing of one who had risen through the ranks by methodical application rather than brilliant insight, regarded my Belgian friend with barely concealed skepticism. "I appreciate your interest, Mr. Poirot," Inspector Blunt said with professional courtesy, "but the case is quite straightforward. Dr. Kershaw has provided a clear medical explanation, and there's no evidence to suggest anything more sinister than natural causes." Poirot's response was a masterpiece of diplomatic persistence. "But certainly, Inspector, you would not wish to overlook any detail, however small, that might strengthen your conclusions. I ask merely to satisfy my curiosity about this remarkable timepiece that has caused such tragedy." Grudgingly, Inspector Blunt permitted us to enter the great hall. The golden clock stood exactly as we had left it, its gilded surface now seeming somehow tarnished by the shadow of death. Poirot approached the mechanism with the reverence of one who appreciated fine craftsmanship, his small hands hovering over the intricate astronomical devices without quite touching them. "Magnifique," he murmured, his eyes taking in every detail. "But observe, Inspector, these small scratches on the brass strike wheel. They are fresh, made within recent days, and this adjustment to the escapement mechanism would require considerable expertise to accomplish without damaging the delicate balance of the whole." Inspector Blunt examined the areas Poirot indicated with grudging attention. "Perhaps the restorer made these adjustments as part of her work?" "An excellent suggestion. We must certainly question Miss Caldwell most thoroughly. But first, if you will permit, I should like to examine where Sir Lionel fell." The chalk outline remained clearly visible on the marble floor, positioned at an angle that suggested Sir Lionel had fallen backward from the clock rather than toward it. Poirot studied this evidence with particular interest, his keen eyes noting details that had apparently escaped initial examination. "Most curious," he observed, kneeling with careful precision. The position suggests Sir Lionel was moving away from the clock when he collapsed, yet the head injury indicates contact with the marble base. This would require a most unusual trajectory for a simple fall. Heart attack victims often stagger before falling, Inspector Blunt explained confidently. Undoubtedly possible, Poirot agreed diplomatically, though I detected reservation in his voice. And the key Sir Lionel was holding, found approximately 3 feet from the body, thrown from his hand during the fall. Poirot examined the spot thoughtfully. The distance and direction suggest considerable force behind its displacement, most interesting indeed. As we concluded our examination, I could see that Poirot's mind was already working through the possibilities suggested by the physical evidence. The case Inspector Blunt considered closed was, in my friend's estimation, only beginning to reveal its true complexity. And now, mon ami, Poirot announced with quiet determination as we concluded our examination of the scene, we must speak with those who witnessed this tragedy. In moments of shock, the mind often records details that conscious memory later discards. We shall begin with Mademoiselle Caldwell, whose expertise may illuminate the mechanical mysteries before us. We found Miss Caldwell in the morning room, surrounded by detailed diagrams of the golden clock's mechanism. Her intelligent grey eyes showed the strain of a sleepless night, yet her dedication to understanding what had occurred remained unwavering. She looked up as we entered, her expression mixing professional concern with genuine distress. Mademoiselle, Poirot began with characteristic courtesy, I understand you are an expert in the restoration of fine timepieces. Such work requires not only technical skill, but intimate knowledge of how these mechanisms respond to the slightest adjustment. Indeed it does, Monsieur Poirot, she replied, setting aside her magnifying glass. Each clock has its own personality, its own precise requirements. The golden clock was particularly sensitive, which is precisely why Sir Lionel engaged my services. And last evening's malfunction, when the clock struck 13 times instead of 12, in your professional opinion, could such an occurrence happen naturally? Miss Caldwell's response was immediate and emphatic. Absolutely not. The strike mechanism is governed by a count wheel that physically prevents the mechanism from exceeding 12 strikes. For it to continue beyond that number, someone would have had to deliberately alter the count wheel's positioning. She paused, her scholarly precision evident. The fresh scratches you observed on the brass strike wheel confirm this. They were not present when I completed my final adjustments yesterday afternoon. Poirot leaned forward with evident interest. And such an alteration, it would require considerable expertise? Not extensive knowledge, but certainly familiarity with horological principles. Anyone who had observed my work over the past months could have learned the necessary techniques. The adjustment itself requires only basic tools, a small file, and steady hands. Most illuminating. And during those crucial moments when Sir Lionel collapsed, you were standing beside him. Did you observe anything unusual beyond the clock's discordant chimes? Miss Caldwell hesitated, her gaze dropping momentarily. The darkness was complete, Monsieur Poirot. The clanging was deafening. I felt a slight movement behind me. Perhaps someone brushing past in the confusion, but I cannot be certain. My attention was focused entirely on the clock, trying to understand what had gone wrong. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. And yes, there was a distinct odor in the air, bitter like almonds. I dismissed it initially, but now you recognize its significance, Poirot completed gently. Merci, mademoiselle. Your observations are most valuable. Our next interview was with Dr. Kershaw, whom we found in Sir Lionel's study reviewing medical files with methodical attention. The physician's manner was professionally composed, though I detected a certain defensiveness that had not been apparent the previous evening. Dr. Kershaw, Poirot began diplomatically, as Sir Lionel's physician, you are naturally familiar with his recent state of health. Had he consulted you about any particular concerns? Sir Lionel was not a man who welcomed medical attention, Dr. Kershaw replied carefully. However, I had observed signs of cardiovascular strain during routine examinations, elevated blood pressure, irregular pulse, occasional shortness of breath. He seemed particularly agitated in recent weeks, though he attributed this to business pressures rather than medical concerns. Business pressures? Poirot's eyes sharpened with interest. Dr. Kershaw hesitated, clearly reluctant to discuss his patient's private affairs. I understood there were financial complications involving some recent investments. Nothing specific, merely the general impression of a man under considerable strain. And the unusual odor Captain Hastings mentioned detecting immediately after the collapse. Did you notice anything similar? The doctor's expression became notably guarded. In moments of medical emergency, one's attention is focused entirely upon the patient's condition. I cannot say I noticed any particular odors. Poirot accepted this evasion with diplomatic neutrality, though I could see his mind carefully filing away the doctor's obvious reluctance to address the question directly. As we prepared to leave, Poirot paused to examine the brass key that had fallen from Sir Lionel's hand, now sealed in an evidence envelope. Through the transparent material, he observed what appeared to be a faint blue smear on its surface. "Engineer's blue," he murmured to me quietly. "Used to mark bearing contact in mechanical work. Most curious to find such a substance on a ceremonial key, would you not agree, Hastings?" The investigation was revealing layers of complexity beneath what Inspector Blunt had dismissed as a simple medical emergency, and I could see that Poirot's understanding of the case was evolving with each carefully conducted interview. Our next interview took us to the conservatory, where Count Morozov sat in contemplative silence, his aristocratic features etched with the particular melancholy that seemed to follow him like a shadow. The autumn light filtering through the glass cast intricate patterns across his elegant form, and I was struck once again by the dignity he maintained, despite the tragic circumstances that had brought him to England. "Count Morozov," Poirot began with diplomatic courtesy, "your observations during those crucial moments may prove invaluable to our understanding. You possess, I believe, considerable knowledge of fine mechanical objects." The Count's smile held traces of bitter memory. "The Morozov collection was indeed extensive, Monsieur Poirot. I learned to appreciate such craftsmanship from childhood, though my expertise was that of an enthusiast rather than a technician. When one has lost everything to revolution, one clings to memories of beauty and precision. And during the midnight ceremony, you were positioned near Lady Ione." "Indeed. I stood by the western window, perhaps 6 feet behind her. In that instant, when the lights failed, I detected the slightest movement to my right, barely a displacement of air. More significantly, I heard a tiny mechanical click, quite distinct from the clock's discordant chiming. It came from the direction of the servants' corridor, not from the clock itself." Poirot's eyes sharpened with interest. "You are certain of this sound's origin?" "Absolutely. In my former life, one learned to distinguish between the whisper of silk and the drawing of steel. This was neither. It was the precise click of a mechanical device being operated with deliberate intent." We found Lady Ione in her sitting room, where she received us with composed courtesy that struck me as both admirable and faintly unsettling. Her black mourning dress emphasized her natural beauty while lending her an air of dignified sorrow, though I noticed her hands remained perfectly steady as she poured tea. "Lady Ione," Poirot began gently, "please accept my condolences. These circumstances must be particularly difficult." "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Lionel's death was sudden, though Dr. Kershaw assures me his suffering was brief." Her voice remained controlled, though I detected subtle currents beneath the surface. "Your marriage was a happy one." The pause was almost imperceptible. "Lionel was generous and provided me with security and position. Our relationship was built upon mutual respect and shared cultural interests. Yet recent months brought financial pressures to the household." Lady Ione's composure flickered slightly. Lionel's investments had proven less profitable than anticipated. The golden clock's acquisition required him to liquidate other holdings. He was convinced the hidden compartment would contain something of extraordinary value to justify the expense. And if the compartment had proven empty, I believe Lionel would have found such a discovery devastating. He had spoken of the clock as his legacy, something that would secure our future for generations. Following Count Morozov's observation, Poirot insisted upon examining the servants' corridor. His methodical search revealed a single strand of fine black silk caught beneath a splinter at the newel post, broken cleanly, as if pulled with sudden force. "Voilà," he murmured, lifting it carefully with a pin. A pull line for creating darkness at the precise moment. Our criminal waited in this corridor and extinguished the lights with theatrical timing. Mr. Delacroix we discovered in the library, his usual suave composure notably absent. He paced, restlessly, his practiced smile failing to materialize as we entered. "Monsieur Delacroix," Poirot observed diplomatically, "you seem troubled by more than natural grief." "I confess, Monsieur Poirot, that Sir Lionel and I had words yesterday afternoon. He had become skeptical about the clock's provenance, suggesting the hidden compartment would need to provide proof of authenticity. I found his implications insulting." Poirot's gaze fell to Delacroix's cuff, where a faint blue smear marked the white linen. "Printing ink from catalogues?" he inquired mildly. "Precisely," Delacroix replied quickly, though his nervousness was palpable. At Poirot's request, Miss Whitfield brought the household accounts to the library. Her efficient fingers sorted through the invoices until Poirot paused at a particular entry from the Market Ferris ironmonger, dated the previous afternoon. Engineer's blue, small brass file, black silk cord, charged to Mr. A. Delacroix for demonstration with clock. "An innocent preparation," Delacroix stammered, "to assist Miss Caldwell with her presentation. Any dealer maintains such supplies." It was at this moment that Inspector Blunt arrived, his weathered features bearing an expression of unmistakable satisfaction. He approached us with the confident stride of a man who believed his case solved. "Well, Mr. Poirot," he announced triumphantly, "your mystery has resolved itself quite neatly. We have discovered a small vial of potassium cyanide in Dr. Kershaw's medical bag, and preliminary tests confirm traces of the same substance on the brass key Sir Lionel held. The almond scent Captain Hastings detected makes perfect sense now." I felt a surge of surprise mixed with reluctant acknowledgement. The evidence, as presented, seemed damning indeed. The poison, the doctor's evasiveness, his intimate knowledge of Sir Lionel's condition. Dr. Kershaw had means, opportunity, and as Sir Lionel's physician, intimate access to his victim. Blunt continued with growing confidence. Perhaps there was a financial dispute, or Sir Lionel discovered something unsavory about the doctor's practice. The case, gentlemen, is essentially closed. Poirot listened with that characteristic tilt of his head, his expression unreadable. When Blunt finally paused, expecting commendation, my friend offered only a small, thoughtful nod. "A most efficient conclusion, Inspector," Poirot said carefully. "The evidence, as you present it, is certainly compelling. Perhaps even a little too compelling, would you not agree?" Inspector Blunt bristled slightly. "Too compelling? I call it good police work, Mr. Poirot. The facts speak for themselves." "Indeed they do, Inspector. But sometimes, when facts speak too loudly, one must ask whether they are being prompted by an unseen hand. The poison so conveniently discovered, the traces so perfectly preserved, it all fits together with such precision that it leaves little room for the messiness of human nature." As we left the library, I could see that Poirot remained far from satisfied with Inspector Blunt's neat solution. The first false lead had been presented, complete with seemingly irrefutable evidence, but my friend's little grey cells were already working to dismantle this convenient conclusion, brick by painstaking brick. As Inspector Blunt departed with evident satisfaction to arrange Dr. Kershaw's arrest, Poirot remained motionless in the library, his fingers steepled in that familiar pose of deep concentration. The silence stretched between us until I could no longer contain my bewilderment at his apparent skepticism toward what seemed overwhelming evidence. "Poirot," I ventured, "surely the case against Dr. Kershaw is quite clear? The poison in his medical bag, the traces on the key, what more could Inspector Blunt require?" My friend's green eyes held that particular gleam I had learned to associate with his most penetrating insights. "Ah, mon ami, but consider the psychology of our situation. A physician of Dr. Kershaw's experience carries many dangerous substances. Morphine, digitalis, strychnine. Why would he choose cyanide, which leaves such distinctive traces and odors? And why would he be so careless as to leave the evidence so conveniently placed for discovery?" Before I could respond, Poirot rose with sudden decision. "Come, Hastings, we must examine more carefully this chain of custody that Inspector Blunt finds so convincing. In my experience, when evidence appears too perfectly arranged, one must ask whether an unseen hand has done the arranging." Our first inquiry took us to Mrs. Beddoes, whom we found in her domain with that stern rectitude that had governed Belemere Court for 3 decades. When Poirot pressed her gently about the events immediately following Sir Lionel's collapse, her answers proved most illuminating. "Dr. Kershaw left his medical bag on the side table in the great hall while he attended to Lady Ione," she explained with characteristic precision. "There was considerable confusion, sir, with servants rushing about for smelling salts and blankets. I myself tidied the instruments back into the bag to keep them from sight. It seemed unseemly to leave medical apparatus scattered about in such circumstances." "And the key that Sir Lionel had held?" "Miss Whitfield set it on the mantelpiece at Inspector Blunt's request. It remained there until this morning when the constable collected it for examination." Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. "So the evidence was accessible to anyone in the household during those crucial hours. Most interesting indeed." Mrs. Beddoes hesitated, then continued with obvious reluctance. "There is something else, Mr. Poirot, that perhaps I should mention. About Dr. Kershaw's recent visits to the house. They became more frequent these past weeks, and not always for Sir Lionel's medical care. I observed him in private conversation with Miss Whitfield on several occasions, and their manner seemed, well, more intimate than professional necessity would require." This revelation cast an entirely different light upon both the secretary's earlier nervousness and the doctor's defensive behavior. Poirot pressed for additional details with his characteristic diplomatic persistence. These conversations occurred when Sir Lionel was away. Usually in his study, yes. Miss Whitfield would dismiss the other staff, claiming she needed to discuss household accounts with the doctor. But medical men don't typically concern themselves with domestic expenditures, do they, sir? Following this conversation, Poirot insisted upon examining the electrical switch that Count Morozov had mentioned in the servants' corridor. His methodical inspection revealed what my untrained eye had missed entirely: a faint smear of engineer's blue on the brass plate, identical to the substance we had observed on Mr. Delacroix's cuff and the ceremonial key. "Voilà," he murmured, lifting the trace carefully with his handkerchief. Our criminal waited in this corridor and extinguished the lights with theatrical precision. But observe, Hastings, this substance transfers easily with the lightest touch. Someone with stained fingers ensured the darkness at exactly the right moment. We found Miss Whitfield in Sir Lionel's study, mechanically sorting correspondence with determined efficiency, though I noticed her hands trembled slightly as she handled the papers. When Poirot informed her of Dr. Kershaw's impending arrest, the effect was immediate and dramatic. "Oh, God," she whispered, her careful composure crumbling entirely. "They cannot arrest Ambrose. He had nothing to do with Sir Lionel's death. Nothing whatsoever." Under Poirot's gentle questioning, the full story emerged. Dr. Kershaw and Miss Whitfield had developed deep feelings for each other over recent months, meeting in secret to discuss literature and music. their friendship gradually deepening into genuine affection. Sir Lionel had discovered the relationship 3 days earlier and confronted Miss Whitfield directly, making clear that her position was conditional upon ending all personal contact with the doctor. "I had resolved to give Sir Lionel my resignation this morning," she confessed through tears, "to spare Ambrose the knowledge of what his affection had cost us both. But now, with Sir Lionel dead and Ambrose facing arrest—" Her voice trailed off in despair. "During the ceremony," Poirot inquired gently, "where precisely were you positioned?" "Near the servants' corridor entrance, monitoring the household staff as Miss Caldwell had requested. During the darkness, I heard footsteps moving quickly through the corridor behind me, coming from the direction of the kitchen stairs." This detail seemed to hold particular significance for Poirot, though its importance remained unclear to me. He made one final inquiry about unusual household expenditures, learning that Sir Lionel had made several payments to London scientific supply companies in recent weeks, amounts that seemed excessive for clock restoration work. Later, when we encountered Dr. Kershaw himself, Poirot engaged him in what appeared to be a purely academic discussion about cyanide poisoning. The doctor's responses were clinically precise, describing the rapid onset of symptoms, convulsions, cyanosis, and shallow breathing that should have accompanied such poisoning. However, Dr. Kershaw concluded with professional detachment, a sufficiently potent dose could cause immediate collapse, and striking the head during the fall might mask some of the more obvious symptoms. As we concluded this conversation, Poirot drew me aside with an expression of growing certainty. "You observe, Hastings, how the good doctor discusses cyanide as if analyzing a medical textbook case? A guilty man, caught with such evidence, would display more agitation, more desperate denial. But Dr. Kershaw speaks with the calm authority of professional knowledge, not personal guilt. Moreover," he continued, his voice dropping to a thoughtful murmur, "his description of the expected symptoms does not align with your observations of Sir Lionel's final moments. No convulsions, no obvious discoloration, merely a sudden collapse. This suggests our true culprit has created a masterfully crafted false lead, complete with planted evidence and convenient timing." Poirot's gaze swept across the great hall, taking in the positions where each member of our party had stood during those crucial moments of darkness. "The psychological game has begun in earnest, mon ami. Our murderer believes they have successfully redirected suspicion, but in their very cleverness, they have revealed the calculating mind behind this elaborate deception. Soon, very soon, that confidence will prove their undoing." The investigation was entering a new phase, and I could sense that Poirot's understanding of the true criminal's identity was crystallizing with each carefully gathered piece of evidence. That evening, as Inspector Blunt departed with evident satisfaction to finalize Dr. Kershaw's arrest, Poirot remained in the library, his green eyes holding that particular gleam I'd learned to associate with his most penetrating insights. The silence stretched between us until he rose with sudden decision, his manner suggesting the commencement of some carefully orchestrated campaign. "And now, mon ami," he announced quietly, "we shall begin the psychological game in earnest. Our murderer believes their deception has succeeded completely, but such confidence breeds carelessness. It is precisely this overconfidence that we shall exploit to reveal the truth hidden beneath their elaborate charade." Poirot's strategy began with what appeared to be casual encounters, yet each conversation was calculated with the precision of a chess master positioning pieces for checkmate. He found Lady Ione and Count Morozov together in the small drawing room, their proximity suggesting the intimacy that had not escaped his earlier observation. "Madame Count," Poirot began with characteristic courtesy, "I regret this continued disturbance to your household, but I find myself curious about the nature of secrets that men choose to hide in mechanical devices." His tone was conversational, almost idle, yet I detected the steel beneath the silk. "In my experience, Such elaborate concealment is rarely employed for mere jewels or gold. Papers, now, papers capable of wounding pride, fortune, even reputation, these are the treasures that require such sophisticated protection. Lady Ione's composure remained intact, though I noticed the slightest tightening around her eyes. Papers, Monsieur Poirot? Sir Lionel was convinced the compartment contained something of material value. He was romantic in such matters. Romance, madame, is indeed very expensive, Poirot observed gently, and one pays not always in money. His gaze shifted to Count Morozov with apparent casualness. You, Count, with your knowledge of aristocratic habits, when you hear of hidden compartments, do you not think perhaps of letters? Letters are the currency most often stored where locks are clever. The Count's response came with telling quickness. In my experience, Monsieur Poirot, men hide letters in the fire, not in clocks. Unless, Poirot replied with that subtle lift of his eyebrow that conveyed volumes, the clock proves safer than the hearth. Lady Ione rose with fluid grace, excusing herself to attend to correspondence with the family solicitor. As the door closed behind her, Poirot murmured to me in French that the muscles of the jaw betray the heart when the eyes are trained to conceal. Our next encounter was with Mr. Delacroix, whom we found in the morning room examining his catalogue notes with nervous energy. Poirot approached the subject of provenance with an almost insulting casualness, remarking how very awkward it would prove if the compartment, when finally opened, contained documentation inconsistent with the sales narrative. Delacroix's flush began at his throat, though his smile remained professionally broad. Such concerns are quite unnecessary, Monsieur Poirot. Martineau's workshop notes were lost during the upheavals in Europe, a common tragedy of our times. He repeated the phrase as though committing it to memory. Ah, yes, Poirot observed mildly, and engineer's blue has such a deplorable tendency to wander from metal to linen, does it not? Delacroix glanced involuntarily at his cuff, laughed with obvious strain, and immediately thrust his hands deep into his pockets. Miss Caldwell, when questioned about the clock's current condition, provided information that proved most illuminating. The strike train and the secret mechanism are distinct systems, she explained with scholarly precision. The damage to the count wheel would not prevent the compartment from opening if one possessed the proper preliminary knowledge. And could such an opening be accomplished manually? With careful work, yes. It would risk damage to the finish if done hastily, but it remains feasible. She hesitated, then added, "There is something else, Monsieur Poirot." I noticed a fresh mark on one of the lower panel screws, a slip of a driver, shallow and new. I observed it at noon, but initially assumed it occurred during last evening's confusion. Now I am less certain. Poirot received this intelligence with the gravity of a priest accepting confession. Then, with a calm that was almost ostentatious, he announced to Inspector Blunt, within earshot of half the household, that at 9 o'clock precisely, the compartment would be opened under official supervision. Inspector Blunt objected to being directed in his own investigation, but consented to the gathering, declaring it would do no harm to satisfy curiosity and quell persistent rumors. Poirot thanked him with extravagant gratitude, then drew me aside with eyes alight with purpose. "You perceive, Hastings, our murderer cannot permit that opening. Either there is something inside which condemns, or the mere act threatens their carefully constructed misdirection. In either case, we must invite decisive action." Poirot's preparations were thorough and ingenious. A hair-fine linen thread, almost invisible to casual observation, he stretched across the servants' corridor at shin height, securing it to the newel splinter where we had discovered the silk strand. French chalk, dusted along the skirting near the electrical switch, would capture the ghost of any hurried footprint. On the brass switch plate itself, he applied a minute quantity of his own chemical preparation to mark any contact. He instructed Mrs. Beddoes to reduce the illumination in the west wing, making the corridor switch newly critical for anyone requiring darkness. These measures he shared only with me and Miss Caldwell, whom he asked to remain in her room until summoned and to listen carefully for the distinctive click of a small mechanical device. As the appointed hour approached, an atmosphere of suppressed tension settled over Belemere Court like a held breath. Guests found reasons to drift toward the great hall earlier than necessary, each carrying their private anxieties and calculations. Lady Ione appeared in elegant black mourning attire, her composure perfect, yet somehow brittle. Delacroix hovered with obvious nervousness, managing to appear simultaneously eager and reluctant. Count Morozov stood apart, his aristocratic profile grave as carved marble. At 5 minutes before 9, Poirot drew me into the shadowy entrance of the servants' corridor. He tested the linen thread lightly to ensure proper tension, then inclined his head toward the switch plate in an attitude of intense listening. The house seemed to contract around us, every sound magnified by the expectant silence. Somewhere above, a door closed with the softest whisper. From the upper passage came the faintest rustle of fabric against wood. Poirot's hand rose in warning, his entire being focused on the approaching moment of revelation. Then, sharp as a blade cutting through the hush, came the tiny but unmistakable click of a lever being operated with deliberate intent in the darkness above us. The click echoed through the corridor with crystalline precision, followed immediately by the soft but unmistakable sound of fabric brushing against the wooden banister. Poirot's grip on my arm tightened as we pressed deeper into the shadows, his breathing controlled to absolute silence. A figure emerged from the upper landing, moving with the practiced certainty of one intimately familiar with the house's layout despite the reduced illumination. In the pale moonlight filtering through the corridor windows, I could distinguish only a dark silhouette, but the purposeful movement toward the electrical switch revealed knowledge that could only have been gained through careful prior observation. As the figure reached for the brass plate, I knew that Poirot's chemical preparation would leave its invisible mark, while the French chalk beneath would capture the ghost impression of their passage. The switch clicked softly, plunging the great hall into complete darkness. At the precise moment, Inspector Blunt was preparing to examine the golden clock's secret compartment. Cries of surprise and confusion erupted from the assembled company, followed by the scrape of chairs and the rustle of movement as people sought to orient themselves in the sudden blackness. But our mysterious visitor had anticipated this chaos perfectly. Instead of retreating immediately, the figure moved with swift certainty toward the great hall, navigating through the darkness with an assurance that spoke of intimate knowledge of every obstacle and pathway. Poirot and I followed at a careful distance, our own movements masked by the general commotion as the shadowy form made its way directly toward the golden clock. In that brief interval before emergency candles could be lit, we heard the distinctive sound of metal against metal, not the crude scraping of forced entry, but the precise manipulation of a mechanism by someone who understood its operation thoroughly. The sound lasted perhaps 20 seconds, accompanied by the faintest whisper of movement as the figure worked at the clock's base with practiced efficiency. When the lights flickered back to life, revealing Inspector Blunt's frustrated expression and the bewildered faces of our assembled company, the mysterious intruder had vanished as completely as morning mist. Yet Poirot's keen eyes immediately detected the evidence of their presence. Our linen thread hung broken at shin height, and more significantly, the barely perceptible displacement of the lower access panel that Miss Caldwell had mentioned observing earlier. "Most regrettable," Inspector Blunt announced with obvious irritation. "But we shall proceed with the examination despite this electrical inconvenience. These old houses prove unreliable at the most inopportune moments." Poirot stepped forward with that particular combination of deference and authority that had served him so well in countless investigations. "Inspector, perhaps we might first examine the evidence our uninvited visitor has so thoughtfully provided." He knelt beside the electrical switch, his small hands hovering over the brass plate without quite touching it. "Observe the faint blue residue. My chemical preparation has done its work. And here, he gestured to the floor beneath, where the French chalk showed a clear disturbance pattern. Moving to our broken thread, he examined the torn ends with his magnifying glass. The break occurred at precisely shin height, suggesting someone moving with considerable urgency, and the direction of the tear indicates movement toward the great hall, not away from it. As Inspector Blunt prepared to open the secret compartment using Miss Caldwell's careful instructions, Poirot positioned himself where he could observe every face in the assembled company. The astronomical mechanisms responded to the prescribed sequence with their ancient precision, and the hidden chamber released with a soft mechanical sigh that seemed to echo through centuries. The compartment contained a single leather portfolio, its ribbon recently retied with obvious haste. Inside lay not the historical treasures Sir Lionel had anticipated, but a collection of contemporary documents that cast an entirely new light upon recent events at Belemere Court. The topmost paper was a codicil to Sir Lionel's will, dated 3 days prior, written in his distinctive hand. But as Miss Caldwell carefully separated the sheets, we discovered that crucial pages had been removed with surgical precision, cut cleanly with a sharp blade, leaving only the faint impressions of words pressed through from the missing sections. "Most illuminating," Poirot murmured as he examined the truncated document. Sir Lionel had indeed prepared revelations, but someone has ensured that the most significant portions would never see daylight. Observe, Inspector, the codicil begins to specify a substantial bequest, but the beneficiary's name appears only as an impression on the remaining paper. Miss Caldwell held the sheet to the light, her scholarly training evident in her careful examination. There are indentations here, a name beginning with what appears to be an N, and possibly Whitfield. Miss Whitfield swayed slightly, her composed exterior cracking for just an instant before she recovered her professional demeanor. Around the room, I noticed subtle reactions. Lady Ione's fingers tightening almost imperceptibly on her chair back, Mr. Delacroix's unconscious glance toward his stained cuff, Count Morozov's dark eyes never leaving Poirot's face. But there is more, Poirot continued, his voice carrying that note of satisfaction that accompanied his most significant deductions. These papers were not placed here by the 18th century craftsman Martineau. The portfolio is modern, the ribbon recently tied. Someone used this ancient hiding place for contemporary secrets, believing it would remain undiscovered indefinitely. He paused, allowing his words to settle over the gathering like a shroud. The question that presents itself, mes amis, is this. Why would someone commit murder to prevent the opening of a compartment they themselves had used as a hiding place? The answer, I believe, lies not in what was hidden, but in what has been removed. Our criminal's objective was not revelation, but concealment, and Sir Lionel's death was merely the brutal means to that end. Inspector Blunt's expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. "You mean the murderer killed Sir Lionel to prevent him from discovering what was hidden in his own clock?" "Precisely, Inspector. But observe the psychological complexity of our situation. The criminal possessed intimate knowledge of the clock's mechanism, access to Sir Lionel's private papers, and the foresight to prepare multiple contingencies. When the original plan, preventing the compartment's opening through mechanical sabotage, proved insufficient, they resorted to more desperate measures. As we prepared to leave the great hall, Poirot's manner suggested the approach of some decisive revelation. The assembled company waited with obvious tension, each face reflecting private anxieties and calculations. The mysterious electrical failure and the discovery of the mutilated documents had clearly unsettled everyone, though I noticed that certain individuals seemed more disturbed than others by the evening's developments. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced with ceremonial gravity, "the golden clock has indeed begun to reveal its secrets, though the full truth remains partially concealed. Tomorrow, we shall gather once more, and I shall demonstrate precisely how these carefully laid plans unraveled, and why the 13th chime of the golden clock will ultimately sound the hour of justice." The psychological game had reached its crucial phase, and I could see that our murderer's elaborate deception was beginning to crumble under the relentless pressure of Poirot's methodical investigation. The final confrontation was approaching, and with it, the revelation of a truth that would expose not merely a killer, but the desperate lengths to which guilt and greed had driven them. The hours following our dramatic evening in the great hall passed in that peculiar state of suspended tension that precedes the final act of any great drama. While Inspector Blunt retired with confidence in his case against Dr. Kershaw, Poirot remained wakeful, his mind working through the implications of what we had discovered and, more significantly, what had been so carefully concealed. Unable to sleep myself, I found him in Sir Lionel's study shortly after midnight, examining the sealed portfolio with that intense concentration I had learned to recognize as the prelude to his most brilliant deductions. The room was illuminated only by the dying embers in the fireplace and a single candle, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mirror the complexity of our investigation. "Mon ami," he said without looking up, "consider the psychology of our criminal. They have gone to extraordinary lengths to misdirect suspicion, first toward Dr. Kershaw with the planted cyanide, then toward Miss Whitfield with the codicil fragments. Yet each deception reveals more about the deceiver than they realize." Before I could respond, a soft sound from the corridor caught his attention. With that swift, silent movement that always surprised me in one of his diminutive stature, Poirot extinguished the candle and drew me into the shadows beside the bookshelf. Through the partially open door, we could observe the faint outline of someone moving with practiced stealth toward Sir Lionel's private safe. The figure worked with obvious familiarity, manipulating the combination with confident precision. As the safe door swung open, revealing the sealed portfolio within, I realized we were witnessing not a random burglary, but the continuation of a carefully orchestrated plan. The intruder removed the portfolio with swift efficiency, but instead of fleeing immediately, they moved to the fireplace and began feeding pages into the dying coals. The acrid smell of burning paper filled the air as crucial evidence was systematically destroyed. Yet Poirot made no move to intervene, his keen eyes recording every detail of the proceedings. Only when the figure had completed their destructive work and departed through the French windows did he emerge from concealment. "Voilà," he murmured, kneeling beside the hearth where a few charred fragments had escaped complete destruction. Using his handkerchief, he carefully preserved several pieces that bore partial text. "Our criminal grows desperate, Hastings. Desperation leads to mistakes, and mistakes reveal truth." Among the salvaged fragments, one bore the unmistakable letterhead of a London scientific supply company, with a partial invoice for potassium compounds and precision delivery mechanisms. Another showed Sir Lionel's handwriting. "Investigation confirms my suspicions regarding the modification of..." before the text disappeared into charred illegibility. "You see, mon ami?" Sir Lionel had discovered something about the clock's mechanism that went far beyond Miss Caldwell's restoration work. Someone had been using his prized timepiece for purposes he never intended. Dawn brought a development that would prove crucial to Poirot's understanding of the case. Mrs. Beddoes, making her early rounds, discovered that Miss Whitfield's room showed signs of hasty departure. Her traveling clothes were missing, personal papers scattered, and most tellingly, a telegram lay crumpled in the wastepaper basket. The message, when smoothed and read, proved illuminating. Investigation complete. Subject's true background verified. Marriage certificate located. Full report follows. It was addressed to Sir Lionel from a firm of private investigators, dated 3 days prior to his death. Miss Whitfield's flight was not the action of a guilty party, Poirot observed as we examined the evidence, but of someone who realized they were being positioned as the perfect scapegoat. She discovered this telegram and understood that her name on the codicil was not a bequest, but a trap. As the morning progressed, Poirot's investigation took on new urgency. He spent considerable time re-examining the golden clock, paying particular attention to the brass key that had fallen from Sir Lionel's hand. Under his magnifying glass, the faint blue smear revealed itself to be more than simple engineer's blue. It was a precise marking, indicating where a minute modification had been made to the key's surface. "Observe, Hastings," he said, his voice carrying that note of satisfaction that accompanied his most significant discoveries. "This key has been fitted with a microscopic delivery mechanism, so small as to be virtually invisible. When Sir Lionel inserted it and applied pressure, he unknowingly administered his own death, not through cyanide, but through a more sophisticated poison that mimics heart failure." The revelation was staggering in its implications. The murderer had not needed to be physically present at the moment of death, nor to handle any poison directly. They had simply ensured that Sir Lionel's own actions would trigger the fatal mechanism, while the clock's theatrical malfunction provided the perfect distraction. The 13 chimes, the electrical failure, the convenient darkness, all were carefully orchestrated to conceal the crucial moment and provide our criminal with the opportunity to plant false evidence. But in their very cleverness, they have revealed the calculating mind behind this elaborate deception. As Inspector Blunt arrived for what he believed would be Dr. Kershaw's final interrogation, Poirot requested a delay. "Inspector, I believe your investigation has been misdirected by evidence that was deliberately planted to deceive. Grant me until this evening, and I shall demonstrate not only who committed this crime, but precisely how they accomplished it." The inspector's reluctance was evident, but Poirot's reputation carried sufficient weight to secure the postponement. As the household prepared for what all sensed would be the final gathering, I could see that my friend's understanding of the case had reached its culmination. "Tonight, Hastings," he announced with quiet confidence, "the golden clock will indeed keep proper time. The 13th chime that announced Sir Lionel's death will prove to be the first note in a symphony of justice. Our murderer's elaborate psychological game is about to reach its conclusion, and the truth they have worked so desperately to conceal will finally be revealed in all its calculated brutality." The stage was set for Poirot's legendary denouement, where all the carefully gathered threads of evidence would be woven together into an irrefutable demonstration of guilt. The mystery of Belemere Court was approaching its resolution, and I had the distinct feeling that the revelation would prove more shocking than any of us had imagined. At 9 o'clock precisely, the great hall of Belemere Court witnessed its final gathering under the shadow of the golden clock. The assembled company took their places with obvious reluctance, each bearing the accumulated weight of 3 days' suspicion and uncertainty. Lady Ione appeared composed in her elegant mourning attire, though I detected a brittleness beneath her careful control. Count Morozov stood near the windows with aristocratic dignity intact, while Dr. Kershaw, released temporarily from custody at Poirot's specific request, entered with the quiet authority of a man whose professional reputation had been unjustly impugned. Mr. Delacroix fidgeted with his catalogue notes, his usual commercial confidence notably absent, and Miss Caldwell positioned herself beside the clock mechanism with scholarly precision. Inspector Blunt occupied a chair with the air of a man prepared to tolerate theatrical display for the sake of final closure, while Mrs. Beddoes maintained her stern vigil near the servants' entrance. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began with ceremonial gravity, his diminutive figure commanding absolute attention through sheer force of personality. "We gather tonight to solve a mystery that began not with Sir Lionel's tragic death, but many months earlier when someone first conceived a plan of extraordinary complexity and ruthless calculation." He moved to stand beside the golden clock, his hand resting lightly on its marble base. This magnificent timepiece was chosen not merely for its beauty or historical significance, but because it provided the perfect mechanism for murder, a death that would appear natural, occurring at a moment of such theatrical confusion that the true cause would be overlooked entirely. Poirot's keen eyes swept across the assembled faces, noting every reaction, every subtle shift of expression. The murderer's plan required intimate knowledge of horological mechanisms, access to specialized materials, and most crucially, the ability to modify the ceremonial key without detection. They also needed to ensure that suspicion would fall elsewhere when the inevitable investigation began. He produced the brass key, now cleaned of its blue residue, holding it up to catch the lamplight. Under microscopic examination, this key revealed a minute modification, a hollow needle, almost invisible to casual observation, filled with a fast-acting poison that mimics cardiac arrest. When Sir Lionel inserted the key and applied pressure in his excitement, the mechanism released a fatal dose directly into his bloodstream. Dr. Kershaw leaned forward with professional interest. Such a delivery system would require considerable technical sophistication, as well as access to exotic compounds, not readily available to the general public. Precisely, Doctor, and therein lies our first crucial clue. The poison that killed Sir Lionel was not the theatrical cyanide planted in your medical bag, but a sophisticated substance that leaves no obvious symptoms. No convulsions, no telltale odors, merely the appearance of sudden cardiac failure. Poirot moved to the electrical switch that had played such a crucial role in the evening's events. The darkness was essential to the plan, not merely to conceal the planting of evidence, but to mask the crucial moments following Sir Lionel's collapse. The 13 chimes, the electrical failure, the convenient confusion, all were carefully orchestrated to provide our murderer with the opportunity to plant false evidence while attention was focused elsewhere. He held up a small vial and brush. I have prepared a simple chemical test that will reveal traces of the engineer's blue used to mark the electrical switch. Each of you will please take one of these glasses and hold it briefly. The procession was awkward and tense, each person handling the crystal tumbler with obvious reluctance before returning it to the table. Poirot applied his reagent with methodical precision. On one glass, a faint but unmistakable blue circle appeared, delicate as a fingerprint but damning as a confession. The marked glass had been handled by Mr. Delacroix, whose face had gone ashen as the evidence materialized before our eyes. Voilà, Poirot observed quietly. The same engineer's blue that appears on the ceremonial key, the electrical switch, and your own cuff, Monsieur Delacroix. The ironmonger's invoice confirms your purchase of these materials, ostensibly for demonstration purposes, but in reality for the construction of an elaborate murder weapon. Delacroix's practiced smile had vanished entirely. This is circumstantial evidence at best, Monsieur Poirot. Many people handle mechanical equipment. Indeed, but not many people possess the specialized knowledge required to modify precision timepieces, nor the connections necessary to acquire exotic poisons through art-dealing networks. Poirot interrupted gently. Your expertise in authenticating mechanical objects provided the technical skills, while your international connections offered access to substances unavailable through conventional channels. He moved to the portfolio recovered from the secret compartment. But the technical aspects, sophisticated though they were, represent only half of our mystery. The true motive lies in what Sir Lionel discovered about the golden clocks, provenance, and what you so desperately needed to conceal. Poirot held up the charred fragments recovered from the fireplace. These burned documents contained Sir Lionel's correspondence with authentication experts who had begun to question the clock's attribution to Martineau. Your carefully constructed provenance was unraveling, threatening not merely your commission on this sale, but your entire reputation as a dealer in authenticated antiquities. Sir Lionel had grown suspicious and was preparing to demand a full refund, along with damages for fraudulent misrepresentation. The opening of the secret compartment threatened to reveal documentation that would expose your deception completely. You could not allow that revelation to occur. Delacroix's composure cracked entirely. You cannot prove any of this. The documents were destroyed, but not all of them, Poirot replied with quiet satisfaction. Miss Whitfield's timely return has provided the final piece of evidence, a partially burned invoice for the precision delivery mechanism, bearing your signature and the address of a discreet London supplier who caters to clients requiring specialized items. The silence in the great hall was absolute as the full implications became clear. Inspector Blunt rose from his chair with grim satisfaction, while the assembled company stared at Delacroix with a mixture of horror and fascination. "The psychological game is concluded, Monsieur Delacroix," Poirot announced with finality. "Your elaborate deception has been exposed in all its calculated brutality. The 13th chime of the golden clock was indeed the first note in a symphony of justice, and now that symphony approaches its inevitable conclusion." As Inspector Blunt moved to place Delacroix under arrest, I could see that Poirot's legendary powers of deduction had once again triumphed over even the most sophisticated criminal mind. The mystery of Belemere Court was reaching its resolution, and the truth would finally be served. As Inspector Blunt moved forward with the handcuffs, Armand Delacroix made one final, desperate attempt to salvage his crumbling deception. His practiced charm reasserted itself with the desperation of a drowning man, his voice taking on the smooth cadences that had served him so well in countless negotiations. "Gentlemen, ladies, surely we can discuss this matter rationally," he began, his hands spread in a gesture of reasonable appeal. "Monsieur Poirot has constructed an elaborate theory based on circumstantial evidence. The engineer's blue could have been transferred innocently, and as for exotic poisons, such accusations border on the fantastic." But Poirot was prepared for this final gambit. From his waistcoat pocket, he produced a small envelope containing fragments of paper and metal. "Perhaps, Monsieur Delacroix, you would care to explain these items, recovered from the ashes in Sir Lionel's fireplace. The metal fragments are platinum wire, used in precision injection mechanisms. The paper bears your handwriting, a detailed diagram of the key's modification, complete with measurements and specifications for the cardiac toxin you employed." Delacroix's face went ashen as he recognized the damning evidence. His commercial mask slipped entirely away, revealing the calculating mind beneath. "You understand nothing of the pressures I faced," he said bitterly. "The authentication business has become impossibly complex. Sometimes one must create the documentation that history has failed to preserve." "And when Sir Lionel threatened to expose your creative documentation," Poirot inquired gently, "he would have destroyed everything I'd built over 30 years, my reputation, my clients' confidence, the entire network that sustained my business." Delacroix's voice rose with desperate self-justification. "One man's stubborn insistence on absolute proof would have ruined dozens of legitimate transactions." Lady Ione spoke with cold disdain. "Sufficient to justify murder, Monsieur Delacroix. My husband's life was worth less than your commercial reputation?" The art dealer's response revealed the depths of his moral corruption. "Your husband was dying anyway, madame. Dr. Kershaw's records confirm his failing health. I merely accelerated the inevitable by perhaps a year at most." Dr. Kershaw rose with professional outrage. "Sir Lionel's condition was manageable with proper care. He might have lived another decade. Your casual dismissal of human life reveals a mind capable of the coldest calculation." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Poirot addressed the assembled company with his characteristic blend of satisfaction and melancholy. The technical aspects of this crime were indeed sophisticated. The ceremonial key was fitted with a microscopic hollow needle connected to a reservoir containing a fast-acting alkaloid that mimics cardiac arrest. When Sir Lionel inserted the key and applied pressure in his excitement, the mechanism released a fatal dose directly into his bloodstream through a tiny puncture in his thumb. He held up the evidence with methodical precision. The 13 chimes, the electrical failure, the convenient darkness, all were orchestrated to provide our murderer with the opportunity to plant false evidence while attention was focused elsewhere. The cyanide in Dr. Kershaw's bag, the traces on the key's exterior, theatrical misdirection to suggest a different poison entirely. Miss Caldwell, her scholarly mind still grappling with the technical aspects, approached the golden clock with renewed understanding. The strike mechanism was deliberately sabotaged to create confusion at the crucial moment. The count wheel was adjusted to allow the 13th chime, something that could never occur naturally. Precisely, mademoiselle. But the true motive lay deeper than mere mechanical deception. Poirot's eyes swept the assembled faces. Sir Lionel had discovered that his prized golden clock was not the authentic Martineau masterpiece he believed it to be. The scientific payments Miss Whitfield mentioned were for independent verification of its provenance. Sir Lionel intended to confront Delacroix with proof of fraud, perhaps even publicly expose the deception. The full tragedy now lay exposed. Sir Lionel had died not from natural causes or romantic passion, but from the cold arithmetic of commercial desperation. His golden clock, intended as a symbol of permanence and beauty, had been perverted into an instrument of death by a man who valued reputation above human life. As Delacroix was led away, still protesting with the mechanical persistence of a man who had convinced himself of his own lies, the great hall began to empty. Dr. Kershaw, vindicated at last, accepted Inspector Blunt's apology with dignified restraint. Miss Whitfield, her name cleared and her future secured by Sir Lionel's genuine codicil, stood with quiet dignity beside the physician, their mutual affection no longer requiring concealment. Lady Ione approached Poirot as the gathering dispersed, her composure intact, but her eyes reflecting genuine grief that had been masked by days of suspicion. Monsieur Poirot, without your intervention, an innocent man would have faced the gallows while my husband's true killer escaped justice. Madame, Poirot replied with characteristic gallantry, justice delayed is justice denied, but justice misdirected is tragedy compounded. The truth, however complex, must always be pursued with relentless determination. Count Morozov, maintaining his aristocratic dignity despite the revelations about his past, observed with the authority of one who had witnessed the collapse of empires. Such men destroy not only their victims but themselves, Monsieur Poirot. The elaborate deceptions they construct become prisons of their own making. Miss Caldwell set about examining the clock mechanism with renewed purpose. The strike train will need complete restoration to remove all traces of the modification. Perhaps, when the legal proceedings conclude, it might find a home where its true beauty can be appreciated without the shadow of these terrible events. As we prepared to depart Bellemare Court the following morning, Poirot stood in the great hall and made one final adjustment to a pair of candlesticks with that exactitude which was both habit and philosophy. The golden clock, its mechanism restored to proper function, marked the hours with serene authority, as if denying it had ever erred. "Mon ami," Poirot observed as our motor car crunched down the gravelled drive, "observe how the morning light transforms the house. Yesterday it seemed shrouded in mystery and menace, yet today it appears merely what it has always been, a beautiful home that witnessed ugly events. I reflected that timepieces had seemed to play us false in this affair, a clock that lied and chimes that deceived." Poirot shook his head gently. "None, Hastings. The clock did not lie. It spoke as it was made to speak by the hand of a man who wished to hide a small untruth within a greater truth. But truth? She is patient. She waits in the dust of a screw, in the smear upon a switch, in the courage of an honest secretary, and in the vanity of a desperate dealer." As Bellemare Court receded into the soft autumn light, I could not help but marvel once again at Poirot's extraordinary ability to penetrate the most elaborate deceptions. The little Belgian detective had demonstrated that no criminal scheme, however sophisticated, could withstand the relentless application of logic, observation, and psychological insight. "The affair of the golden clock is concluded, mon ami," Poirot observed with quiet satisfaction. When the 13th chime sounded, it did not confuse the hour. It announced the presence of the lie that made 13 necessary. And now, order has been restored. Justice has been served, and time itself keeps proper measure once more. The mystery of Bellamer Court was solved, but I knew that somewhere in London's sprawling metropolis, another puzzle awaited the attention of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. The game would continue as long as human nature remained capable of both the most noble aspirations and the most calculating crimes.